Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about the connection and sometimes disconnect between system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs. Just to warn you, about the first 14 minutes of this episode is Chris and I talking about his vacation and things like that. It's interesting for us, but if you're not interested in that, I recommend you go directly to about the 14-minute mark, 14 and a half minutes now. That's when we get into our review of the D&D movie. There we go. Well, good morning and welcome home, Chris.
Thank you, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm very well, actually, but you've had a more exciting 2 weeks than I have. Maybe.
I have, because I've been in your country.
Yes, yes. So, okay, so you haven't done any gaming, obviously.
No.
But you've done a lot of adventuring of a sort. So why don't you tell us about that? Tell us about your vacation really quickly and how it intersects with and overlaps our hobbies, because I think it does.
I think for some it definitely does, yeah. Because it was this. So yeah, for the last 2 weeks we went to Florida, which was mostly Disney. We had one night at a Universal hotel, but that gave us fast passes for 2 days. So I remember we turned up at kind of 6 o'clock Florida time, but for us that was sort of 11 o'clock at night, and I was like, well, Miki, this is late. Annie's going to be shattered. We can just go into park quickly, and we stayed until basically closing. So at that point, that was 10 o'clock Florida time, which for us was sort of 3 in the morning. we were still going. So.
You know what though? At that point, it's not late anymore.
No.
It's early, but
yeah. So, we were just kind of going on adrenaline and being in the, being in Hogsmeade. Like we had tea in the restaurant that you'd said. I didn't have shepherd's pie or whatever it was. I had
what did you think of the food though?
I thought the food there was pretty good actually.
Yeah.
And it was also quite reasonably priced to what we considered paid for the so the following night we ended up going, I think again, we stayed at Universal basically all day. And the fast pass made sense. In a day and a half, we did every single ride we wanted and bunched multiple times to then have to, queue for everything for the next 2 weeks. So that made a massive difference. So we didn't leave until sort of 9 o'clock on our second night. And then we had a 10 o'clock check-in at the very latest at the place we were staying. And we needed to go to a supermarket to get foods. We kind of left just before 9, literally checked in, drove to the supermarket, got some food. And there was a Subway there, and we paid way more for a Subway out of any kind of park than we did for meals for us in the park.
Subway's terrible.
It was the case that's what was there, and
that's
it was
what was. Yeah, I know. I understand. There's a point at which you feed. You don't eat. You don't dine. You just feed because you must. But
wow, how did this end up being so expensive?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was crazy. Whereas the rest of it, we kind of did a mix of the next week of because we basically always ate. I think apart from one morning, we always had breakfast at our place because it's just so much cheaper.
Oh yeah.
And we pretty much always had, we just took sandwiches with us every day. So it was only I think 1 or 2 days maybe we ate out at lunch, and there was a few times in the evening we ate out. And then they the odd character experience and stuff where we'd had to pay. But yeah, that first meal at Hogsmeade wasn't horrendously expensive. So that was.
How did you ride the train back and forth?
We did, yeah. We rode it the wrong way because we were at the Islands of Adventure end when we then went the other way. Because I think the second day, Mika and Anne, we wanted to go on the motorbike. Well, I say they wanted to go on the motorbike. I almost got out of the queue, having queued in it. We got there, thought, we get there at open and we'll be fine. And of course, we got there at a little bit after opening, I guess, and there was already an hour and a half queue because it was broken. And so we were just in this queue. So actually, the first 2 hours of us being at Universal on the second day was us in the Hagrid's motorbike queue because that doesn't have fast passes.
Wow.
And so we were just stuck in this queue, and by the point we actually got near it and I saw the ride and I was like, I can't do this, and they were like, no, you can, and I did it, and I think I enjoyed half the ride, and then the second half of the ride hated. And I rode the motorbike, and my hands at the end where there's grooves on the things, and they were just marked into my hands because I've been gripping it that tight. Because I hate rides.
What did you think of the line that goes through Gringotts Bank?
Did we fast pass Yeah, we must have had fast pass in that. So I don't know. I think we saw some of it because you go through the actual bank itself,
Yeah.
and we just went another way. It was good because I've been to Warner Brothers within the last 6, like the Harry Potter Studios thing. They have the same set exactly of that in the Harry Potter studio. So it was like, oh, this is nice, but I've seen this recently, so it was okay. But yeah, that was. I mean, it was cool. That I like that. The one down at Hogsmeade, I think we enjoyed more because we went to Hogsmeade. It was very late at night. It was pretty empty. When we were in Diagon Alley, it was crawling.
Yeah,
and you couldn't move. And we kind
that's
of were
how it
there
was when we were there too. And it was hot.
But it was so busy, and we're like, this is ridiculous. We can't like literally can't get in any of the shops. It was like, this is just silly. Which was then what happened at Disney for like the next 2 weeks. That's not doing it. There was days it wasn't. But yeah, then we basically did the rest of our time at Disney, where Magic Kingdom was Magic Kingdom. But I loved being in Hollywood Studios. I think we all basically said the same things. The Galaxy's Edge was our favorite area of any of the parks we went to because it felt like being on a Star Wars set, except all the people there pretended they were really in Star Wars, which was cool. And Smugglers Run and Rise of Resistance are both amazing. And they feel like you're playing like a real world. I mean, Rise of Resistance is like almost a full-on role-playing experience because none of the other people break character. The things that were iffy for us is the first time we rode it, it broke down, but it broke down just after like a surprise thing. So then the second time, like the first one, we're like, this is amazing. Oh my goodness. But then the second time around, it's like, well, we don't know how it ends. And so we've lost that immersion kind of that we had going the first time. So that was really irritating. And then we realized that that's kind of a common occurrence that ride breaks down. It was broken like twice a day, every single time we were at Hollywood Studios. And unluckily we were on it one of the times it broke down. But Rise of Resistance is amazing. And the whole if everything else had been rubbish, it would have been worth it just for that. But everything else was great. Well, but I love that. And yeah, the whole Galaxy's Edge kind of experience was just awesome. I loved it.
So now, do you want to dump your 5e game and go play Star Wars?
Yeah, part of me does. Yeah,
I knew that was going to happen.
I mean, I won't because as good as because the Star Wars game has, it's good and bad. It's not perfect. The role-playing game. It's a big change of sort of faffing around trying to get it. I'm trying to download a new image, and every single thing I find is a flipping WebP file, which you have to then convert. But I'm bored now. Yeah, it was good. I mean, yeah, certainly some of the areas are cool, and we really enjoyed Epcot. And I think partly because each of those areas does, to some extent, feel, some are better than others, but like each of the little things feel like being in that country, sort of. We joked before we went into the British area, the secretary at Epcot, and Andy was like, what if there's little corgis in the shop? We went in, there's like row upon row of corgis, and he's like, this is ridiculous. No one has corgis in this country.
Somebody did.
We kind of think, well, that's probably what all the other areas are like, Annie, that to us, we're like, oh, these are really genuine, but actually they're not. They're little caricatures of
Although the funny thing is there are and I haven't been to Epcot in 25 years, but having been to parts of Mexico and been through like markets and been just like the vibe of, a bunch of stuff for sale and lots of people hustling and bustling and that kind of thing. There was, at least 25 years ago, there was a portion of the Mexico pavilion there was a portion of it that felt like it. It was that was fun. I do remember many, many years ago going to the Norway pavilion. And I remember everyone, like all the Norwegians who worked there, it was over a summer. And so there were a bunch of college students working there from Norway, and they were all tall. And so finally I asked them, I was like, this may sound corny, but like, are you all that tall? Like they were all like the men, the guys, the girls, they were all like 6 feet tall. And they joked and they said, yeah. And they said there was one guy, Norwegian guy who worked there, who was short, and he was like their token short guy, because the rest of here you go, because everyone else was. I was like, I guess there's your Viking roots, but good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It seemed like your travel there and back was pretty uneventful.
Yeah, they were fine. Yeah, it's funny. So I think things being genuine. There was a restaurant in the French area which served crepes and what they call galettes. And galettes are savory crepes. Now we didn't know that until the last time we went to France, which was 2019. And the area we went to, that's what you did. If you went out for lunch, you couldn't get a sandwich. You had a savory crepe. That was your options. And so having eaten them loads, we actually went there. We ended up going back a second time because we enjoyed it so much, thinking, no, this is genuine. Like, that is how they cook the food there.
Good.
So yeah, I think Epcot, Epcot was Mika's favorite area. I enjoyed it in the end because it was the only thing that was close to a roller coaster that I went on and didn't hate, because I went on test track twice and I was like, that does 65 miles an hour. That's reasonably fast. Because it's in a car, it just feels like it's being in a car as opposed to being strapped onto some bit of metal flying around a loop.
Yeah, I'm not a barf ride person. I mean, I could do those 2 Harry Potter rides. I can do Space Mountain. I can do all those kinds of things. But roller coaster that goes upside down and those really fast, no, those like.
Because I really don't like heights. I also couldn't cope with the other Harry Potter rides either, because there's too much of like, hey, you're flying down in something, and my brain is like, you're gonna die, and I'm like, so I'm closing my eyes. A lot of the motion simulators were hilarious because Mika gets really bad motion sickness on. Like, Mika can't watch me play some computer games because she will get motion sickness. So she gets motion sickness on almost every motion simulator. The minute there's any kind of sideways or anything movement, she has to close her eyes. And anytime it looks like I'm falling off something, I'm closing my eyes. So we're on these roller coasters, on these motion simulators, particularly in Universal, where almost every ride is a motion simulator. Mm-hmm. Where we're saying, like, Annie, when it stops doing it, top our hands. We're sitting there with our eyes closed while Annie's enjoying all these rides, tapping our hands to say, like, it's okay. It doesn't look like you're falling anymore. Yeah. It's like the Transformers one. It's like Spider-Man. Fair enough, I knew I'd be flying through the sky. I didn't really understand why on the Transformers one I ended up on the top of a building. I was in a car. How did the car? I don't know how it got there because I closed my eyes as it starts going. But yeah, it was good. We had a lot of fun.
Good. I'm glad for you.
And now it's cold being back in.
Now it's cold.
It's not even that cold in Britain, but compared to what it was like in Florida, it's freezing.
You suddenly got you got a little used to the comfort. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I played my regular 5e session 2 weeks ago, so we're chugging along in that. And then this last Saturday, because our GM was out, I ran a play test of my 2D20 fantasy game and got some really good feedback. Like, some things worked the way I wanted them to work, the way I'd envisioned that they would work. And then the magic system is I wouldn't say it's the problem, but that's where the pain points are right now, is figuring out how to make this spell system that I've envisioned work without writing so many rules that it becomes Pathfinder, or being so vague that you might as well just write, do what you want. And that's the whole magic system. So trying to find that balance and keep it within the kind of like higher action, cinematic vibe, rulings over rules type of thing of what I want and what 2D20 I think can do. That's the challenge. But we had a good session and learned some things and have made some revisions. And I'm at like 70-something thousand words.
And you're still going.
I mean, it's going to be about 200 pages. That's now. I'm glad you're sitting. You're going to disagree with me. I am including an adventure in the book.
Yeah, but you're not publishing it. In a PDF, I don't have an issue with that because
I guess. Yeah.
It's, the kind of thing like if you were going to print it, and I've done this, I've printed PDFs. You print what you want.
Yeah.
So you don't have to print the adventure. It's not like you're going to print it, but in a printed book, when you're paying for that word count, that's when it's always that 20 pages of word count could have been more monsters or more GM section or anything like that.
Yeah, but it's coming together. It's coming together. I hope within the next couple of weeks I'll have it out.
Good stuff.
But today, for this week's episode, and actually this is crazy, this is the soonest to release we've recorded in a really long time.
Yeah, because this will be out, so when this releases on Wednesday, we only recorded this on the preceding Monday, so 2 days.
So this is actually current, and your background does it. So we're going to review and talk about like the game, reactions and the game dimensions and the story itself of the Dungeons and Dragons movie, which we now have both seen. So, first off, what is your elevator pitch? What is your shortest review? 2 to 3 sentences. What did you think of it?
I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and it did feel, in some ways negatively, but it felt like a D&D party on a D&D adventure, and including various things where you think that's the GM, that's the GM railroading them, that's the GM messing with the party, that kind of stuff. It actually, which kind of gives it a get out clause in one way, but yeah, that's to me, it was good fun. It introduced some cool stuff, and it felt like people playing D&D, but with really good effects for stuff.
Yeah. You know what? And by the way, if you're listening and you haven't seen the movie, spoilers are plenty. Spoilers ahoy. So if you have not seen it and you don't want to have parts of it ruined, you should come back to this after you've seen it, so you've been warned. I agree. I enjoyed it. I thought fun's the word that I would hold up the most. It was not a deep or profound story, but it also, at the same time, it was, I don't think it was frivolous or stupid.
No.
Like it wasn't like, I am not a fan at all of like Jim Carrey style humors. That's just like, it's fart jokes and stupidity and like behavior that nobody acts like that kind of stupid stuff. It wasn't something like that at all. It was a good story. It was an interesting enough story that had enough depth to like underpin the fun, so you felt like you weren't just stuffing Cheetos in your mouth. If that makes any sense. I mean, I would give it a solid B plus, maybe an A minus, maybe an A.
I think I with that. I mean, I kind of go and think, did I enjoy it? I definitely enjoyed it. Were the problems with the plot? Yeah, but like I said, to me, there's a lot of films I've watched recently, which I can sit there and enjoy. Like I was watching the third Jurassic World film on the plane back the other day, because I've already seen it. And I knew that if I had to switch it off halfway through, which I did to go to sleep, I would be fine with that. Yeah. And the plot of that is just nonsensical. And it's just, you can tell someone's written some set pieces with no reason to get from one to the other. Now, the D&D doesn't really feel like that, but to some extent we want this scene and we want this scene, and how are we going to link these scenes together? That's how a D&D adventure is written on the whole.
Extent, you come up with like tentpole encounters. Yeah. And then, I mean, this is often where I have, my biggest trouble. I'll come up with ideas that are like your big pieces, but then you think, how do I connect them together? No, I thought that it, before we get into details of it, I mean, I thought that the story made sense. The story flowed. It didn't feel like it was one big action scene.
No.
To the next. Another thing that several people I've talked with who saw it and actually shared similar reactions to it, something that we really appreciated was that CGI sat in the background. Like,
I think they did a good job of the CGI was there to serve the purpose rather than CGI for CGI's sake.
Well, CGI for to cover up for the fact that the acting sucks, the script is crap, and the plot is obvious and stupid. I mean, that's every Transformers movie is that. It's like, we're just going to bury you in CGI because we actually don't have a quality movie. Star Wars prequels, same thing as far as I'm concerned. The CGI supplemented it, enhanced. It didn't take the place of, and I appreciate that.
I think my only real criticism is that kind of it felt bitty in the sense that like they have an initial thing they're doing, and then they're doing another thing to get to this thing, and then that doesn't quite work. So it kind of veers, but again, that actually felt more like what happens in a D&D game. It doesn't, not every film has to be a very simple, at the start of the film, right, here's the end, and we're going to spend the whole film getting to that end with things on the way. This was a case of, well, we're going to do this thing. Oh, that didn't work. Right. Well, we're going to try this other thing. Okay. Well, that hasn't got to, and eventually, at the end of the whole thing, they sort of stumble onto something else, which is kind of how D&D works. I'd like to give it the benefit of the doubt and say that's intentional, not that they sort of bumbled their way through it and made up the script. I mean, the people who directed it basically also did the script and seemed to. This isn't one of those things where the script's changed or they're writing the script on the fly, or where they've had to change directors and you can tell it's got different people. I definitely got the people in charge of it had a lot of love for D&D as a whole and went to it. I mean, I thought it was an interesting choice. Sorry, spoilers, but it is properly set in the Forgotten Realms. I mean,
but not in it's something that I'll throw in there that I think is really was great. Like my wife and I went and saw it. She doesn't know any. I mean, didn't know anything about this stuff. There was nothing about it, and I appreciated this. There was nothing. There was no informational gatekeeping. Like you didn't need to know about the Sword Coast or whatever. You need to know about Waterdeep and Neverwinter and that kind of stuff. Those things were presented in a way that I thought that the script writers did a really good job of presenting those things in a way that they communicated their place and their importance without just going on and on and on, or presenting them in the way where you'd have to have that inside baseball knowledge to make sense of them. By the way, just thought of this. For you GMs out there who are prone to long bouts of exposition, you, the frustrated storyteller or frustrated novelist who feels the need to talk for 20 minutes to cue up the great history of it, you don't have to. Especially for a known property like this, if you're running something in a setting that's already made, I mean, I think you could take advice from how this movie presented those things. It just laid them out as they were very good at the Waterdeep's another city, Baldur's Gate is a city, right?
The Harpers, they're good guys. The Zentarim, they're bad guys,
and you don't need 5 minutes of history about it.
And it was they just dropped these names in, so if you knew the names, you're like, oh cool, and then it was just a name drop.
Yep.
It didn't matter. It wasn't super important to the plot. But they drop these things. They're just like there's lots of things you can see. So they drop in a lot of races. I mean, the only one that pulled me out of it, they drop in the cat race, which there's never a real, they currently they're calling them tabaxi in D&D books, but they're cat people. And for some reason, they don't want to call them cat people in the books. They looked awful. I couldn't work out whether they was really bad CG or really bad animatronics.
I've heard people comment on that too. And then the little baby thing, that was that was the only piece where it's like
I couldn't work out why it was wrong, but it was just like that doesn't look wrong. Whereas they had Dragonborn that looked fitting, and they had like instead of calling them bird people, like Arakocra or whatever they're called, which looked great.
I always want to call them Krakatoas.
But they just kind of they looked silly, but they fit. I mean, how can you have a guy that's a bird person with wings that doesn't look a bit silly? But they're not to the level of the cat people.
Who sits in a chair with a back.
But yeah, as a whole, that's the stuff I liked.
I thought that you want to get to nitpicky or things that you didn't like?
I don't. Like I said, the cat thing being there and the plotting being a bit haphazard, but I'm not sure it wasn't deliberate. That's the only things I'd really.
I actually thought that the plot worked in that they start off with this. You get this background context as to why they are, the bard and the barbarian, who they are, why they're connected, why they're in the state that they're in. Okay, so you get a little bit of background, and that worked, and then you get them going off to say, okay, we need to find this thing to do this thing. Okay. So then they're going to go collect people that they know who can help them. Okay. This makes sense. Then they realize there's a left turn that they have to take in order to accomplish the thing that they're after, or get the thing that they're after. And in that then becomes the actual push of the story, is to accomplish this thing so they can do this, they can get this artifact. The artifact then becomes something that says something about the characters and their relationships at the very end, but getting it is actually secondary. It's the thing that they have to do. And then the moment that they have to choose to be heroes, that's what the story is really all about. And the only thing that in the whole movie, the cat person thing was weird. It was like being at a comic book convention and the furry was there, and it was just odd. The only thing that I had a few times where I got a little twitchy was I think that Chris Pine played the bard right up to the edge of obnoxious. And I don't mean obnoxious in like bards because they're terrible. I mean like he played it almost to the point of it being hammy. And if he would have overplayed the character, if he would have pushed it a little bit farther, he would have been playing a caricature. Like I remember seeing an interview with him many, many years ago when he was talking about how he went about deciding how to play James Kirk.
Yeah.
And he said that one thing that he had to really focus on was not playing William Shatner playing Jim Kirk. He had to focus on playing Jim Kirk. Otherwise, he would be a caricature. And I think he was right up to the edge of being a caricature of the somewhat obnoxious player who's always trying to be funny and cute and always trying to drop jokes and things like that. But I think he didn't go past it. He was right up to the edge.
Yeah.
One last thing about him, and I'll ask, well, what do you think about this? We were talking about this on Saturday some, and I've seen some chatter about this online. People are not arguing, thankfully. Give it time, but questioning whether his character actually is a bard.
Yeah.
Or is it a rogue pretending to be a bard? Because if you're going to get all 5e ruly, aside from strumming that little instrument, he didn't, there were no spells. He did not, you know what I mean? There was nothing bard like aside from his assertion and his instrument. That's what he was.
I'll come back to that because I think we can talk about some of the things that like how it does link to role-playing games as a whole, but also specifically D&D. Yeah, I saw this glimpse of a headline somewhere, but I didn't read the article. But we're kind of saying how they show different ways of charisma in it. So like Chris Pine's obviously meant to be a charismatic character, but his is all like knowing winks and jokes and deception and that kind of thing. But clearly he has high charisma. And I think he did a really good job of like being a character that actually some people would find obnoxious because some people don't like him. Some people just straight up like you're annoying. And then you've got the, paladin guy who's clearly just meant to be smoldering and super good looking. And some people are like, he's lovely. And then other people are like, no, you're
I thought he was perfect.
I thought he was great.
I thought the walking over the rock, that was the perfect, like we've all had that player who plays the lawful good, just like chaotic neutrals, like chaotic asshole. There's sometimes like lawful good is like lawful stupid. It's like, no, I said I'm going to do that. I'm da 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 da. You're like Dudley Do Right and you're obnoxiously so. And that walking over the rock was such a nod to that kind of character.
I've read an interview about that with the directors, and they said that like in every other time they would cut before he got that far, and one time they just said, let's just keep the cameras rolling and let's see what he does. And he just walked over the rock.
It was perfect.
And so that was just the actor. They didn't know what he was going to do because they were just like, normally they cut before and moved back to another shot, and they just
that guy he was so perfect because he got it without making it a caricature or like a paladin, a real legit like first or second edition paladin in my view wouldn't go out of his way to like needle you about what a paladin he is. He would just he would just be it.
So if we start talking about some games, I want to bring up some which I haven't read and pointed out anywhere. So it doesn't mean I'm not the first person to notice it. But barbarian character here. There's something I realized about halfway through. I kept noticing they kept making subtle digs to the fact that she's not very bright. But it's the odd thing where she says something, everybody looks kind of like, why that's really dumb. Why would you say that? Now, no one now outright calls her out for being stupid. But there was a point, there's only 3 or 4 bits in the film where she either says something or acts something where it's like, that's not too bright. I think, actually, maybe they are playing up to the fact that she's a barbarian, and the classic barbarian has like a really low intelligence stat. And obviously no one else is going to say she's dumb to her face because she'd kick their ass. So, but there were a few points I wonder if that
was a point. I didn't pick that up.
Well, like I said, like I literally was sort of 2 or 3 things I thought, but it was only about the third thing. I was like, she just says something really dumb. I wonder if they're doing that on purpose to make out that, she's streetwise and she's got wisdom and stuff. But actually, when it comes to just sort of intelligence and knowing stuff, she's not there. and it's not important.
Mm.
But if they did that on purpose, like, oh, yeah, the bard thing's an interesting one because he could just be a rogue, but then he doesn't do any fighting either. Now,
True.
one way to look at it would be the fact that if you look at bards in 5e, it's kind of like rangers. Right, rangers have spells in 5e, but if you look at the rangers in a certain way, their spells are things like stuff you could do with poultices, or it's a special arrow, or it's traps. And you could make an argument for rangers actually having no magic at all. It's all like tradecraft.
Right.
Now, arguably, the same thing could be applied to a bard, that you could say the bard is actually, they're lifting people up with their music. It's how they say things with their words. And it's not so much that they're doing magic, because obviously in old editions, a bard really was like a wizard / rogue. But you could argue that bards aren't doing magic at all anyway. They are doing, depending on what spells you pick.
Yeah.
Depending on spells pick, it is just, it's all natural.
Yeah.
But the other thing that would counteract that is that I read the prequel book before it, and at some point in the prequel book, it makes some mention of his magic. And there was one point in the film, I think it was something to do with that helmet, or the guy, like every time the sorcerer puts the helmet on, we talk about the sorcerer, there's that guy there. And there was one of the things he said to me made me think that he's actually saying that someone else in the party would be better off with that helmet, which made me wonder if he was talking about the bard, actually saying that the bard, he has magical powers, he just hasn't tapped into them. So it was literally one little reference in the book and one little thing in the film that made me think, well, I wonder if he has got magic powers and he just doesn't want to use them or he's never tapped into them, because he doesn't use anything roguey other than the fact that he picks, he can do lock picking and he's sneaky. Well, any character can do that with the right skills. So he's a bit weird that he doesn't really match any kind of class at all,
right?
To any extent.
I thought that the barbarian worked. I thought that it worked as a character. I wondered on a couple of occasions, like when she would yell when fighting, like, is that supposed to represent rage? Because that's a soft sell of rage if that's the case.
I think that's a good nod to people like us that know what a barbarian rage is, without having to explain how barbarian rage works.
Yeah, because that could be really tedious. Like afterwards, like, oh, I am now tired because I have rage. Then it becomes stupid exposition that breaks the flow of the story.
I mean, I'd argue that the sorcerer guy, to me, he's a wizard, not a sorcerer, because he seems to be like, I mean, it's a really picky distinction between what is what. He's clearly not a warlock, but in 5e terms, there's parts of me, okay, I know he doesn't have a book, but he seems to have almost like gadget things that he has to use to cast his spells. Like he's got, and the rules very clearly call it out that you do not have to have a book. You just have to have something your spells are recorded in. And to me, he felt more like he was casting spells by rote, as opposed to he had an inherent ability to do magic, which is what sorcerers are meant to be. But then that's one of those things you often do anyway, because they go, well, we don't want to call him a wizard because that's Harry Potter, so we're going to call him a sorcerer. Yeah, good point. Now, yes, it means a different thing in terms of the rules, but as far as anyone else is concerned, it's a guy that does magic.
I think, to the credit of the writers, I think that someone who didn't know anything about D&D rules, but who got interested in learning it or playing it because of watching the movie, I don't think that there's anything that they would look at and say, like, wait, oh, he was supposed to be a sorcerer, like, wait, that doesn't make any sense, or he's supposed to be a paladin, I don't understand why. I think that's, they did well enough without trying to directly explicitly model the rules as character classes, like model them. I thought, and now you move to the druid,
because everyone, this is the one on the internet, isn't it? She can shapeshift into an owlbear. That's not allowed. Yeah, it is. It's really simple. There's two ways of doing it. One, you just say you can shapeshift into an owlbear, or number two, you get your monster manual and you write the word beast. Done. There you go.
That is a perfect example of where fandom and geekdom, there are times where you just want to beat someone with a rolled up newspaper, not to hurt them, but to hurt their pride. You just
Yeah.
want to slap them around with a Sunday edition of a newspaper because you're like, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you being such a jackass and beating someone over the head with your mastery of made up stuff? Like, give me a break. Yeah, people bitching about that is just ridiculous. I thought that the way that it was portrayed, I thought the Hulk smash at the end of Avengers was honestly the owlbear bested that.
Yeah.
The owlbear and the red wizard, the treatment of the red wizard that was perfect. I loved that.
I've still seen that criticized for just ripping off the Avengers, and you're like, well, and it was funny, so it was still funny.
But there are so many people who sit around on their little keyboard warriors, and they have maybe they don't have a whole lot in the real world, so they're masters and gods of the made up world, and they get very jealous when people don't worship their ideas. It's just stupid.
I said,
But
the end of it, like, I mean, realistically, they could have had her turn into a bear. Now you can do that by the rules,
sure,
and it wouldn't be any different in any of those scenes. They made a town into an owl bear because, well, that's a bit more interesting
because it
than
was
just
cooler
turning into a bear.
and
Yeah.
it fit the property. It was this fantastical creature, and you say, what is that? And I mean, when you think about it, an owl bear, like, what was someone on where they're like, hey, Gygax is like, let's combine an owl and a bear, that'll be a good monster, let's have a skunk raptor, like, what?
I was thinking it doesn't do anything different. Everything she does is
Yeah.
just what a bear could do.
Yeah.
So it's nothing game breakingly bad.
Fun.
The fact that it's an owl bear is kind of irrelevant.
Now, how about forget about the owl bear, forget about her wild shape. How about her, the like the place of her character as a druid in the story? Did it work? Did she work as a druid? Did it work as a druid within that story? What do you think?
I think she's the one that doesn't fully fit into the party, but then also that's the way kind of it's set. The others are basically, we've got like thief bard, thief barbarian, thief rogue, thief sword. The others they're all thieves. And they're all stealing stuff. She's literally the one that, you can see it's where they created a party where we've got all of these and right, well, someone's play a druid. Ooh, how are we going to fit a druid in? And the guy's like, well, I know a person that might help us out because her interests are aligned. And yeah, that is how you have to cram people
worked.
in.
I thought it worked.
I think that was, that was fine. She seems, they managed to cram a paladin into the party. And that's how do you get a paladin into a bunch of thieves? Well, actually, because he's the guy that knows where the thing they need is. And unfortunately,
and I thought too,
he's not in a film as long.
I thought, especially with both the paladin and the druid, I don't remember the names of any of these characters, so I'm just calling them by their class. The paladin and the druid, both of them had, and I love this because it felt like the writers did a nod to the overwrought backstory. Like, my character, you can't just have a character who's like, yeah, I grew up in like a military family and I was in the military, now I'm adventure. No one can have like everyone has to have nowadays like not nowadays, it's been this way for, ages. People write their backstories and there's a degree of like my tortured backstory. Like, like when people go on singing competition shows, they don't say, my whole family encourages me. The refrain is always, everyone tells me I can't make it, I'm going to show them. Your tortured backstory, I felt like both of them had a healthy nod to that.
I hadn't even thought that. Yeah, the paladin in particular is properly over the top with how tragic and awful. We actually get the flashback with his tortured, awful backstory. It's a bit of a shame actually, having gone over how bad his backstory is, that he then isn't there. Sorry, spoilers, but he's not there at the end. Although you can work that out from watching the trailer that he isn't there when they're fighting the bad guy. So
and then he pops up at the very, with Hugh, what's his name? Last guy.
Yeah.
Him. That character. That if there's a sequel, you're sure he's going to be in it.
I mean, I think he'd have to be in it again because he was great. I mean, hopefully next time they'd all be a bit more heroic so they could be doing something that it's appropriate for him to be in there. What about other nods to particular game or game logic or beasties? I've got one that I really liked.
Go ahead. I've got one too.
So I mean, it could be the same one. So this is properly spoilerific. So if you haven't seen the film and you've been still listening to it, stop listening. This is a great bit. The whole scene with them using the speak with dead spell to talk to people, I just love, because it just felt like a DM dicking with them. Because every time they ask a question, he's like, that's a question. No, that doesn't count. Does that count? Yes, that's another question, by the way. And the fact that they just kind of had to go through dead person after dead person after dead person, you just felt this is a DM who's like, right, you've got this spell. I'm going to get the best use out of it I can. You're going to have to ask multiple people. Every single time you ask a question wrong, I'm going to use that way. It's like, the wishes one where any GM ever will use the wishes to just not work the way you want them to. And it just felt, I was, despite the fact I thought it was a really funny scene anyway, there's just this whole extra level to me. It's just like, I imagine this DM just dicking with these players and just laughing, oh, I'm so funny. And all the players being like, oh, you're such an asshole. Can you stop it? I loved that. It was so good. That was just great.
That was well done. It was one of those like meta moments that you have this thought, well, what about this? And then, I remember when, and I think I might have mentioned this a while ago on the show, but when I was a kid playing a druid, and is it druids? Don't they have a stone to flesh? Or did they?
The other way? No, it must be the other way around. That'd be weird.
No, it's stone to flesh because it's changing, because it's paralysis from like Medusa or Basilisk.
Oh, okay.
So it was the spell that was created to solve that one problem. And I remember my character when they were like, oh, the DM was like, oh, we're starving, we have no food. I was like, okay, I'm gonna find some rocks and turn them to flesh and cook them. Like, okay, what can't you do? Can you do that? And so I remember imagining these river rocks of like jiggly flesh cooking over a fire. I thought that the arena fight had a couple of really good things. And I thought the Displacer Beast was really well done.
Yeah,
I'm not like cute or whatever. I thought that was they portrayed the thing well. I liked what they did with the Mimic. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the way they treated the gelatinous cube, because it's not like you get consumed immediately.
No, it does damage over time.
It does some damage over time. I thought that the gelatinous cube was cool. I think that they maybe should have like made them look a little like singed or acid scorched coming out of it, but whatever, who's to complain? I also thought that the inclusion of the D&D cartoon characters was absolutely perfect. Where's Uni? Nobody knows. But
that was kind of a blink and you'll miss it thing, because I saw them and was kind of like, wait, was that? And then they come back and I'm like, oh my god, it is. That's hilarious.
The only way that could have been made more perfect is if Bobby the Barbarian would have said Uni at some point and look for that damn unicorn. I thought that was brilliant. And then they're hiding in a cage at the end. I would assume, unless they got out of that cage and ran away, they're dead because of the Thean magic.
That was funny, because I really wasn't expecting that at all.
Oh, you didn't know that was coming?
No, I had no idea that they'd like crammed them in there. So I had no idea that they were going to be. And then suddenly we wait, what? What? And there they were.
I thought that whole arena scene was it was a couple of things. Like I said, the Displacer Beast, the D&D cartoon party. I think that as an idea or an example of like, if you want a big gonzo magic, high action, kind of crazy, over the top set piece scene / encounter, that's a great example of one. Obviously, if you did something like that too often, it would become lame, because you would just, it wouldn't be special anymore, because it would be, typical. But I thought that as inspiration for a GM, going like, not necessarily to do the same thing, but like that you could have a big, like that's a big showy encounter. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah.
What else? Wait, you know what? It's funny. I had a 2D20 moment while I was watching the movie, and I forgot, when was it exactly? There was a, golly, what was it that Chris Pine's character threw a rope like around the neck of or something, and the thing galloped off, and then he looked down and his feet were caught in the rope, and he got pulled off.
Yeah, I can't remember. That sounds about right.
When that happened, I thought to myself, you can't do that in 5e rules as written.
No, technically not.
Because 2D, but you can in 2D20 because if the player rolled a complication and a success, you could do that.
Yeah.
So there was that was me watching the movie.
I look at it now, seeing it, it's kind of made a it's made a reasonable amount of money, but not as much money as I'd be hoping it's making.
Yeah, it's doing well. It's
yeah. I mean, it's made more money than. Well, actually, the only big film it's made more money than this year is Shazam, which is not surprising.
But Shazam's not doing all that well.
No, I mean, but then that should have made more money. So, I was hoping it'd be making kind of like, well, it's not going to make Ant-Man money, but if it was making more money than I don't know, Creed or Scream or something. So it's
maybe it'll get a slow burn. Maybe people will,
hopefully. I mean, I want to go back and watch it, and I haven't had a chance yet. So I can't believe that Super Mario Brothers is raking in the money, but oh well.
Zero desire. What else? What else can we take from this? I think that one thing that a big thing actually that I come away with this from is that you and I talked about this actually in our science fiction story ideas and our fantasy story ideas, the notion of twists.
Yeah.
The idea of you think that you're headed for A, but you're really B is really the more important thing, but you have to do B to get to A, and then like A becomes the denouement at the end of the story, but the real climax of the story is how you solve issue B, and that's what this movie was.
Yeah, I mean, like they've got a relatively simple motivation of what they're trying to do, but then to achieve that they have to do something else, and then at the end of the film there's something else that happens altogether, and it's almost that moment where the certain group of players might be like, we don't care. They can all die. We're just going to leave. And in this case, the PC group decide, no, we're going to go and be heroes.
But the original motivation was to go get this artifact to, get to bring his wife back so he could bring his family back together. But then really the story is actually about saving the city from this psycho red wizard. And then there's this, in the closing moments, we learn more about Chris Pine's character and the, maybe commentary on like, what's a family, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite good. I think the thing that annoyed me kind of I had no issue with his decision because they make it very clear that actually he's been together with this woman for sort of, 10 years. At that point, actually, that's longer than he was with his wife, blah, blah, blah. It was the fact that why kill a character to just bring, again, spoilers, but why kill a character to bring them back so soon? It's one of these things you just wish like, oh, can't characters die? And I know they've literally got it in the plot that they can bring someone back from the dead, but it just takes that edge off. If you can, I mean, I guess it's like D&D though. If you can kill a character and then bring them back, I thought it would have been nice to go all search for Spock and spend a whole film bringing them back from the dead.
I don't think bringing back the barbarian, that was less about bringing her back, and it was more about commentary on his friendship with her and his looking at his daughter and this whole idea of like family. And then remember that they had made it okay because beforehand they dropped the comment about like, oh, your wife is, she's somewhere else now and living her other unlife, whatever. So don't mess up her calendar by bringing her back, is essentially what they were saying. What can you pull out of this for either direct story ideas or indirect? Now that you want to, but you don't want to dump. You're already playing.
I'm already playing D&D. I just wish I could use that. I wish I could use that speak to the dead scene because it's so good. But yeah, if either of them have seen it now, that's like it's kind of almost the opposite because it'd be hard to take things from this without people you're just lifting straight from the movie. Yeah. I think like the pacing thing, the fact that it's pretty rapid. It doesn't sit there, but I think actually, like you said, the exposition things are dropped in this, which are if they're not important, people don't go on and on explaining it. They explain in detail what this helmet can do because the helmet's relevant to the story, and then also another character's backstory and so on. but they don't explain the things that are necessary. No one needs to hear the history of the Harpers, so it doesn't go into it. Harpers good guys, Red Wizards bad guys, and then they show kind of that they're not very nice and explain them a bit, but that's it. We don't get the history of Neverwinter because it's not relevant. It's a city.
Well, something beyond that. If you are, and here's a suggestion to a GM, if you're running a story in an established setting, you don't have to go on about that.
Yeah.
Like, unless you have a player who's like, yeah, I'm new to the game and like, I don't know, forgotten what, I don't know anything about this stuff. But even then, if you have to introduce something, you don't have to go on and on and on. You can just say, yeah, Neverwinter, it's this major city, really cosmopolitan, lots of politics, lots of money, lots of power. It's like Rome. It's like Rome, but with like magic. Okay, problem solved. You don't need to like project a map of the damn thing and give people a tour. A couple of years ago, I played some 5e games, and the DM would go on for, honestly, I would check my watch. He'd be going on for 10 to 15 minutes describing like a throne room. And I get it. Like, in his mind, he had put so much thought and so much effort into developing this thing. But there was a point where it's like, you're here to set up the story and manage how it unfolds. But we get to play a role too. So shut up.
I think
take that advice from this.
And the other piece of advice, but is either you'd throw this at players if you're actually playing a 5e game, or actually this is why, to some extent, it doesn't feel like, you already said it. It doesn't. You said that there's points where you couldn't do this in 5e rules as written, but it would work in 2D20. All of the characters are underpowered versions of what they could be. We have a sorcerer who half the time his spells don't work. That sounds like you're either playing another system or a player who is deliberately saying, I don't want, I'm going to try this spell. Oh, it doesn't work. We've got a bard who doesn't do magic.
You just have to do that GM fiat to do that. Good point.
But we've got a bard who chooses not to use magic. We have a barbarian who, looking at it, is not using half the rules she gets other than raging. We have a druid that appears to also do no magic whatsoever. She just does wild shifting.
Good point.
The paladin doesn't seem to do a lot else other than be really good at fighting and be good looking. And a rogue who seems to do nothing else other than sort of be roguey, but he's not doing any backstabbing. Actually,
although, I could look at Hugh Grant's character, and I think that maybe he's like the mastermind archetype.
But they're not, these are, when you see people play D&D, particularly, well, any version of D&D, they're using the ability. That's my main character's ability. I'm going to use all the abilities to get the most out of them I can. Whereas in other systems, people might just play their characters.
Yeah.
Because you don't have all these other little rules. You play in your character, whereas D&D, you're almost playing the class. This is actually was a nice touch. Well, here's some of the things these classes can do, but then we're not going to try and tick every single last box of what a character can do. Their background and their motivations are just as important as their skill set. Whereas in D&D, I think actually the skill set is probably all. In something like 2D20, it isn't. You might have some things you can do. So
you mean like class abilities?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like anything else, Savage Worlds will do the same thing. You might have one or two class abilities, but you don't have the long list, particularly as you level up, the long list of things you end up with. But yeah, I mean, on the whole, if you've got any interest in role-playing games, I think my thing is going to be, if you have any interest in role-playing games, even if you're not a big D&D fan, go and see the film, because if the film does well, then they'll start looking at more properties that we like to turn into film. Like, if this film bombs, we're not getting any more D&D films. So we need it to do well. When there was people like, if this film does badly, then Wizards of the Coast will suffer. Well, then great. Then the whole hobby suffers. Because when Wizards of the Coast is doing well, because D&D is doing well, role-playing is doing well.
Yeah.
But if Wizards of the Coast fail, then someone else isn't picking it up. Wizards of the Coast, say TSR, and made it bigger. You need these big things out there. So we want the film to do well, because then we will get, maybe we get a Deadlands film, or we get.
I would like to. Okay, there's that. Obviously, there's the possibility of other properties, either other games entirely or other D&D settings. I would also like to see these characters and this overall story. I'd like to see it grow more. Like I'd like to see. I'm not a big Forgotten Realms fan. I don't know a whole ton about it. It's really not my thing.
We have an Eberron film, please.
But
or Dark Sun.
Yeah. But I do. It would be interesting to see what these folks, if there's another film and some of these same ones are involved in it. Like, I mean, the writers.
Yeah.
Where else would they choose? What would they choose? What storylines would they choose to develop that are sitting there in all these decades of lore for Forgotten Realms? I would
Yeah.
personally like to see it, but I agree.
Well,
You're right. We hope that the film does well in order to send a signal to the market, to the producers of
yeah.
movies, to do more good stuff.
I think they're looking at doing a TV show. Now, I can't
Yeah.
imagine, Chris Pine is not going to be in a TV show.
No.
He's film guy. But some of the, you can imagine these guys, these could be in a TV show. So I assume that TV show is meant to have some kind of overlap with the film, but there's certainly, there's a whole bunch of other worlds they can go into then. And when I keep hearing that there's a Dragonlance thing in the back.
That's what I've heard, that the TV series is Dragonlance.
But Dragonlance are the kind of thing that would work as a film because it's like big, epic, big things. Or you can do it more low key and do it as a thing. I mean, this could have been a TV series, and they chose to do it as a film. But D&D works both. We've said this previously. Your big set pieces with massive things, that's what works in a film. If it's a TV series, you can build the characters and you have more NPCs and you have more time to go things in. Like we said, that's more like a campaign. So this has shown at least it can work as a film. And it can definitely work as a TV series because we have the Vox Machina thing, which is a TV series. So so I enjoyed it. I'm glad it's doing well. I hope it, like you said, I hope it has a kind of a longer life. I think streaming's meant we don't see that longer. You used to have films back in the day that they would do okay in the cinema and then they make a fortune on video and then Blu-ray or DVD. That doesn't really happen anymore because everything just goes onto a streaming platform, and so people just watch them. I mean, I remember I used to, like, every Christmas I would buy the films that Christmas that would come out that year on DVD. I don't do that anymore because everything I know is just on a streaming platform. I can just watch it whenever I feel like. So I don't buy DVDs anymore. I can't remember the last time I did.
I hope it does well. Slow burn, longer life. But yeah, definitely it's worth watching. If you're a GM, forget about it if you're a player. Go watch it if you're a player. But for a GM, if you've seen it once, go see it again and think through how would this be modeled in the rules. I'm going to go see it again and look at it from that eye so I can not ignore, but I get the story. I got it already. Now I can pay attention to that. And I think that you're right that taking the advice of maybe running it as, like, if you have a game that's either going to be a short story arc, or you're bringing a chapter or a campaign to a close, if you want to run a big high action set piece type of thing, I think that this is you know what, and also though, without going, I think there's a point where you jump the shark and it just gets kind of silly, like so many of the scenes in The Hobbit. Most of The Hobbit, it was like fanfic is what it was. The whole thing with the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, like the race in the goblin, that was silly. The bouncing Donkey Kong barrels, the friggin' molten dwarf statue, and the fact that room would have had to been like 50 or 70 feet deep. It just was ridiculous. Like, here's me sitting in the movie theater being like, there's nowhere near enough gold in that damn statue to fill a basin large enough to fit a damn dragon in. This is stupid. That's me going sideways in a movie. So I think there's a point where big high action set piece scenes can get stupid because it's just like everything's cranked up to 11. It's just too much. I think the scene in the arena didn't do that. It did high action, but it didn't get stupid.
Well, because it still kept everything down on a relatively low level. What was happening to the characters?
Yeah,
they weren't blowing up the whole stadium or anything properly crazy. I think it's a good film. It fits the characters' backstories in without dragging anything out. It doesn't, it worked relatively well. That's a nice example of a GM kind of going, "What I'm going to dictate things here," which I don't know. It depends what your players are like. maybe some players are happy with the idea that the GM is can occasionally, like the example earlier, you said that in 2D20 it's fine, you can throw a complication in because if you rolled that, there's nothing, you can have success at cost in D&D.
Sure.
It doesn't spell it out very well. It's a more modern concept really than 5e is. Maybe in the next versions out, it can explicitly spell out, well, if your character's failed the roll, then choose to have the roll succeed, but with a complication, and spell it out a bit more. Because that's what happens loads of times in this film. Like, it worked, but not the way they planned.
Right.
Well, it doesn't really happen in D&D.
Right.
So it's a perfect example of how to throw in a bunch of that stuff. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it's, I would say it's probably the best film I've seen this year, but it's a really low bar because it's like Ant-Man wasn't great and neither was Shazam.
Well, the last movie I saw in the theater before this was Maverick. So I just don't go see movies that often because they're mostly not good.
Maverick was great.
So, all right. Good deal. Thank you so much for listening. You can visit our show's homepage at anchor.fm/Fluff and Crunch. That's FLUFFNCRUNCH. We would really appreciate feedback and reviews on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to this on. Thanks so much.